you, and good afternoon, everybody. And a very big thank you for asking me to speak today. I really am quite honoured to be here. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're gathered and pay my respects to elders past and present. You know, I'm lucky enough to have been sent to New York City recently to go to the United Nations Council on the Status of Women. There were about 100 unionists there to give a voice to the United Nations body about the importance of organised labour, of collective activism, of unions and decent work in raising the world's impoverished women out of poverty. It's the first time I've ever been, and it was an eye-opener to me, I tell you what. We could not insert the word union into the statement. They would not allow us to do that because it might offend the corporate sponsors. We could not get any reference to collective bargaining, to the right to associate, as a means of helping women raise themselves out of impoverishment. The very best we could do at the end of the day was get some reference to decent work, but without any real definition about what decent work was. However, on the other side of the card, MasterCard was a major sponsor of the conference, and they had a special ceremony congratulating MasterCard because you know what their answer to helping impoverished women out of poverty was?
Give them a credit card.
Yes!
When they handed them out as
Yes! They gave the UN Council on the Status of Women something like 5,000 MasterCards with $500 credit on them. And they handed them out to women in Africa and wherever. The UN, you know, this just highlights to me, you know, the battle, the struggle that we have. Entrepreneurship is the answer to everything. Okay, we'll give you this money, you'll buy a duck or a flock of ducks and you'll start your own work, you know. Forget those poor women who are stuck working in beer halls and have to drink themselves silly every night to get men to come in and drink with them. Forget about the women who are working in sweatshops in Bangladesh. Forget about the women in Cambodia who just work waist deep in water every single day fishing. Forget about the women who have no jobs at all and are starving around the world. Oh no, we'll give everyone a MasterCard. That'll fix it. I made one last speech. I was so proud of myself, you know, because I'm actually quite a shy person. I know you don't believe that, but I really am deep down. And I had to, it was the last conference, and for some reason, the union collective that was there said to me, Ged, you can make the last speech to the plenary. And so I had 3 minutes. And I said, right, and I just let go, right? I just said, you all have your head in the sand. And there was an Australian government official on the stage as well. The Australian government was just as bad as everybody else there. Got your head in your sand. If you cannot see that collectivisation, that right to assemble, trade unions, blah, 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 I did it, and I just thought, I've got nothing to lose. There's kind of dead silence in the room, right? And then somebody claps. And then another person started to clap. Bug me if I didn't get a round of applause. And I was kind of the only speaker to get a round of applause. And afterwards somebody came up to me and they said, thank God someone said it. You know, we've been waiting for someone to say it. I thought, well, you know, I should have lost it at the very beginning. Why did I wait to the end to lose it? And, it, you know, someone's just got to say it. And we've got to stand up and say it. We've got to say it more and more. You know, Justin Trudeau, the new Prime Minister of Canada, not only is he devilishly handsome, but I think that he also has some very good principles and ideals. And he was there talking about feminism. You know how feminism is a dirty word to the right. I don't like it. You know, Julie Bishop won't call herself a feminist. And he says, I am a feminist, he said. And the more people say it, the more normal it will become and the better it will be. So I'm really, rather than telling you all these stories for lots of reasons. One is to say congratulations for calling yourself a union, for developing the union and getting it going and making it work. Congratulations to all the, very proud of the NUW who is supporting and the other unions. You know, I listened to Owen on 3CR the other day. Did anyone hear him on the radio? It was a fantastic interview. It was really great. And amongst other things, he said, organised labour is critical to solving the unemployment crisis. And I thought, yes, he said it. And he said it out loud. And I thought, but then I felt suddenly very challenged. Oh my God, I'm the president of the organised labour movement here in Australia, and I personally took that as a challenge. And it made me rethink a little bit about what I wanted to say to you today, because the fact is, the union movement hasn't always been in sync with the struggles of our unemployed comrades. All too often, pardon?
And is it now?
And is now. I'm getting to that,
Now.
comrade. Absolutely, so this is why I'm here today. All too often we have sat back and we've avoided the issue of marginalisation of the unemployed and the underemployed, focusing on strongholds of permanent, secure or more secure workers. I was reading a wonderful extract because, listening to Owen, it made me go and search a little bit on, the wonderful Google platform. And I found a wonderful piece written by a man called Jim Munro, who led the Victorian chapter of the Unemployed Workers Movement back in the 1930s here in Victoria. And it's a gorgeous piece. If you've got time, just Google Jim Munro and the Unemployed Workers Movement, and I think you might find this. The VTHC, the Victorian Trades Hall back then, would offer help to unemployed workers by offering SUSO parcels, food parcels with kerosene and blankets and clothing, etc. But in return, they were told they had to behave and not upset the status quo, not interrupt the work of the hall. Hollow promises were made by the trade union leaders back then and not kept. And the unemployed workers rebelled against this. They met under the 8-hour monument here in Victoria Street. You know the 8-hour monument that's just up here? I love it that these things are still here and you can visualise it. They all gathered there in Victoria Street and they started out on their own. They started agitating as an organised group. They were getting arrested. They were holding marches, holding demonstrations. They were blocking evictions of people from their homes. And they were an organised movement. And it was later that the hall almost begrudgingly came alongside when the movement gathered such popular support that even the judiciary started to stop putting them in prison. They had some very important political wins. If you move along the time frame a bit, there's lots of other examples, but in the 1980s there was the legendary Wollongong Unemployed Workers Union, and later called the WOW Group, or the Wollongong Out of Workers Union, which fell out of the massive restructuring of the coal and steel industries in the Illawarra back in the 80s. They held, which is right now, the legendary Right to Work March from Wollongong to Sydney. A march that started out, I don't know if you've seen anything about this, but it is absolutely amazing.
On it.
You were on it, sir. Did you wear those really little shorts that they were all wearing in the 1970s? They all wore these stubbies. You remember them? They tucked right up here. There's these gorgeous photos of all these, unemployed workers in their tights and this hair and real, sort of late 70s garb. I think it was 1979. And they started off with about 50 of you from Wollongong, and as you walked along you picked up other workers and the crowd grew and grew and grew until finally when they got to Sydney, there were about 10,000 workers down tools in Sydney and joined the protest outside the Sydney Town Hall. And I think at the end, according to various sources, there's between 10 and 20,000 people actually there supporting unemployed workers in this country, and it was an absolute key factor in the removal of the Fraser government. And other wonderful things grew out of that. There was an arts movement, a film industry, graphic artists, all sorts of people gathered together with that movement, and it was really a wonderful and rich time. One of my favourites, posters, there was a big era of posters, we've got them all over our house. But there's a Redback Graphics, and I'm going to swear, but I'm only swearing because I'm quoting, okay? So there was a Redback Graphics company that made a wonderful poster, and it has rich monkeys on it. They're clearly rich because they're sort of wearing top hats and they've got watches and things. And they're lying around looking all luxurious and idle. And then the title is, "If the unemployed are dull bludgers, what the fuck are the idle rich?" And I just think, yes, and this was really everywhere. And there was a strong allegiance in Wollongong with the TLC, but that softened when the Accord settled in. And once again, despite still strong pockets of working together, the movements grew apart again. And curiously, as I reflect on all of this, there's lots of reasons why this has happened, good and bad, yes and otherwise. But there's been a few consequences, and I heard Cassandra Golder here before, and we work very well with ACOS in the welfare sector, so please do not take this as criticism of the welfare sector. But I think what's happened in this neoliberal world of ours is that the plight of the unemployed and people who are generally on welfare have been relegated to the welfare sector, and the welfare sector to fight for and champion. And even recently, more recently, I don't know if you've noticed, but the top end of town, the BCA, has suddenly become this, beacon of light, arguing for an increase in the job, which is great, and better job services. And organised labour has been totally squeezed out of that space. Even if we want to get in there, I think we often find ourselves ignored if we are saying anything, not invited in or left out, often despite our efforts. Recently, the Fin Review in the Oz, those wonderful publications, held a summit, and we went along to summit. The ACTU was invited along, and the only speakers that were challenged or denigrated or put down or belittled were the union movement speakers. I don't know if any of you read that account of that summit. But we went along with very good things to say. I personally was attacked by Martin Parkinson, who was the treasurer, because I dared to say something I thought was quite intelligible about tax. They don't like it. They don't like us to be there. And I asked myself, why? Is this our lack of activity ourselves? Have we just vacated the space a little bit? Or is it by design? And does leaving the issues of people looking for work to the welfare and big business sectors marginalise organised labour as well, which is actually infitting with the neoliberal conservative ideology? I don't know. I think it's probably a bit of both. I'd be very interested to hear people's views on these things. So this has really given me a wake-up call. As I reflect on all of this and what organised labour's role is in all of this, it's just so obvious that for both our sakes, we need to work together. We need to get our acts together. We need to gel our efforts and intermingle our campaigns and our struggles. And there is so much that what we fight for works for us both and will improve the lives of all Australians. So what are some of those things? Well, you've heard a lot of them here today. Apart from not being enough jobs for all workers to enjoy a working wage, we have the massive plight of casualisation. I think somebody raised that before. Short-term contracting and sham contracting mean many workers fall in and out of employment. This creates complicated intersections for the social security system and the monolithic, cumbersome jobs network, both with their perverse incentives and modus operandi that are unbelievably punitive, that aren't hope-giving or helpful. The legal aid system has come to me strained by the ridiculous notion. Now, I always find this hard, but you would know, how you have to project your income to get the dole. How do you project your income if your income is precarious and intermittent and you have no idea how many shifts or whether you're going to work at all the next week? So what do? You underestimate the amount of work you get quite sensibly so you can maximise your benefit. And then what happens? You have a debt because you've been overpaid and you're not notified of this debt because the ATO doesn't do an audit for 2 years. And then you find yourself prosecuted by the ATO and you seek out legal help through legal aid. This is the legal aid telling me this. This is what they have burned me this. So then what happens, if you are a woman, if you are non-English speaking, if you are low socioeconomic demographic to start with, you find it hard enough to get jobs, and you have a criminal conviction. The marginalisation is made even worse. This is happening right now with our system. These are things that we need to fix, things we can change. There's lots of good examples of how we can fix these things, and we need to really beef it up. There's the vet sector. Oh, I know, my goodness me. Which has been a total disaster because it has been left completely to the market. This was done by a good Labor government, I might add. We'll throw this out, the market will fix it, it will all be wonderful. So what have we got? We've got private RTOs hungry, so hungry for government funds that they provide useless training that helps neither industry nor those seeking work, all workers generally. It's a mess. Then there's the public education itself. TAFE is completely running to the ground as a public provider. It is starved of funds, it is dying. We absolutely have to stand up and really fight for TAFE to be reinstituted as the public provider of vocational education. We have a federal government that wants to exit funding of public schools altogether. Shame. Focusing its efforts on funding private education only. We have a taxation system, as you've heard, we've had a lot of talk about it today, that is completely skewed to allowing the wealthy and corporations to amass billions, or public institutions that we need to have a decent life, are starved of funds. And ultimately we need to fight against an ideology. It's all-pervasive ideology, and it sweeps across all political parties. It's got its tentacles out there. I'm not saying there's any one political party. Ideology that does not believe in society, does not believe in anything but the individual, does not think that governments should provide services beyond a defence force. I kid you not, there are people in our federal government right now that have verbalised that thought. Does not believe that its people should be able to work together collectively to organise and create power beyond that of the individual in order to better ourselves. It's an ideology that does not believe a government has a role in creating jobs with industry support and planning, that only the market can do that, that ends up driving industry and jobs away and doesn't encourage new industries to settle here. An ideology that believes workers are human capital. I hate that term. Human capital, to be traded, to be skilled up and down to suit the market needs, to be screwed into holes like widgets or cast aside if they don't fit. An ideology that fights against all regulation, even good regulation like occupational health and safety standards or the Fair Work Act, calling it red tape that binds businesses and loathes regulation that protects so many rights. Long gone is the right to work. And this results in pitting workers against each other in a race to the bottom. And we heard the previous talk a lot about that. An ideology that believes a few should amass wealth and trickle down crumbs to the many. An ideology that we are living right now that will only be beaten if we organise, if we stand together and we make many believe that they can change things. We've talked a lot about all the problems. I heard this young woman say, what about the answers? You're right, because right now, they're all the things that we have to fight for and things we have to fight against if we have any hope of changing anything. Right now, the main policy of the government is to bash unions. That's pretty much it they've got right now. All around them, we've heard there are corporate wrongdoings, corrupt banks, the Panama tax crisis, harsh budget cuts. We've got a budget coming up where they're going to apparently fund $16 billion. I'm very curious about that. Seems like a mess of issues all over the place. Kind of a bit out of touch, really, with what we're talking about right here. We are about. They still aren't even pretending to do anything about unemployment or a jobs crisis. Despite nearly 750,000 people officially looking for work, tens of thousands more, with real data is, Marcus has pointed out to me that we really need to start working on real unemployment data, not the 1 hour a week stuff that we get from the ABS. The closest thing we have, I think, is an anti-jobs plan. We've seen jobs traded away through trade deals. We've seen the protections that we have around the labour market absolutely broken down. We've had an entire industry. I don't know if you know about this, but our foreign seafarers working on Australian routes have lost every single job. Every single job. Now, these are international routes. These are going from Newcastle to Victoria, from Victoria to WA. It's just like a bus route, just like a train route. They have been sacked, and the government has given those businesses the authority to actually employ overseas workers on $2 a day on those ships. We should be marching in the streets, and we have been we have a jobs embassy set up in Canberra. We have been trying. I think people are numb.
How do we topple the media?
Do you think people are numb? The media is a... I don't know.
Yeah, you could all work for $2 a day, yeah, we'll make $700 a year, just provided that the houses are worth $10,000.
You're dead right. I understand you completely. If the system were actually organised for that, that would be fine, but that's not it. The people are working $2 a day so those companies can make a bigger profit. You know, Alcoa, when they got rid of their ship, they saved $5 million. $5 million for a multinational billion-dollar company. And you can't tell me they've only done that for financial reasons.
And it didn't go back to other workers.
No. And you know what? That's right. I don't know where it went. So you wonder. And now the reason they're not marching in the streets is because the government is terrified. The Victorian government subsidises Alcoa to the value of like $80 million a year. They threaten to take $80 million a year out of Alcoa. Alcoa says, okay, we're getting out of Portland. And then who gets blamed? The government. They've got us like this. We've got to get out of it. The destruction of the construction industry, no more automotive industry. You know, why aren't we investing billions of dollars and of our dollars in building up a clean carbon economy, getting industries to invest here? Seems like there's just a plan to shrink the workforce and swell the ranks of people looking for work. Okay, so the criticism of the trade union movement. Absolutely, I think that we have let this creep up on us. You know, as I said, we really have not stopped. We haven't had a forward-thinking plan about how we're going to deal with this. We met for 2 solid days and thrashed this out recently. The world is moving so fast around us that we've got to keep one step ahead all the time to meet the challenge. In the last 30 years, we find ourselves in a place where 40% of our workforce is casual, insecure, short-term contracts. 40% of our workforce who are paid employees have no access to paid leave, sick leave, annual leave. It's amazing, isn't it? 40%. These things that we take so much for granted. We looked at these things, not just, you know, we really need to do something about this. We have to do things differently. Union density is falling, despite our incredible reach and influence on the economy. We need to grow in numbers. Numbers are power. Okay? If we don't organise and reorganise, then the people out there that are tying us all up in knots like this, they think, union movement, what are they going to do? Got to have the numbers to be able to do it. Right now, we have a great deal of reach in this country. We are very lucky because 60% of all workers are covered by a union instrument. Whether it's an EBA, whether it's the minimum wage, or whether it is an award rate. Okay, so 60% where we still have influence, we've still got time, we can get in there. We just need to actually get up there and start organising. Again, that's why I congratulate you. We're faced by this Uberification. Have you heard about Uber? Everybody knows about Uber, right? Okay, so you're not an employee anymore if you work for Uber. You're a consumer of their app. Okay, despite the fact that Uber pays you your money, Uber decides what you get paid, Uber does all the regulation around you, they do the banking for you, you're not an employee. You're in the sharing economy. And all the risks of employing someone falls directly on the shoulders of the individual who can least afford it. You know, we've been talking about the pressure on governments to support this startup culture. I mentioned before, this entrepreneurship. You know, they say to women, you can have it all. You can have it all, women, you know. You can have a good paying job by being self-employed at home. At the same time, you can cook, clean, mind the kids, and run the errands. Isn't that great? We know that 1 in 2 startups fail. 1 in 2. They don't pay themselves enough wage, they don't pay themselves superannuation, they certainly do not have any sort of protections whatsoever. We discussed the low-tech but just as damaging rise of imported workers, the very real risk of exploitation these workers face, but also the impact they have on the labour market here. You would have seen the 7-Eleven stuff with the students. You would have seen what happened with the Bayada chickens, that employing overseas workers on backpacker visas, but bringing them here in. The Fair Work Ombudsman described it as organised crime. Organised crime. Where they bring in people from Taiwan, from the Philippines, from Korea. They work, they pay them a pittance, treat them abominably, and then they send them home in the 3 months. These are jobs that Australians could have. This is impacting on it. Not only that, these poor people are exploited terribly. And all these things drive down wages and make safeguards that we've won just disappear. And still, our Prime Minister is constantly reminding us that there's never a better time to be an Australian. Not strictly true for everyone. We are seeing rising inequality. We are seeing the lowest wages growth in history. We are seeing the highest amount of insecurity and lack of opportunity. It's having real consequences right now on our lives. And technology and innovation, sure, they're the catch cries of the time, but we have to make sure that they create jobs and a system, as you described, that is meaningful, secure and rewarding. So the challenges for all of us that we thought at the end of the day is, we have to really change what we're doing, because it was a hard message to give the union movement. What you've been doing for the last 100 years, but it isn't working. Okay? We've got to change. And I think getting allies, working together, growing the movement through partnerships like we're discussing today is going to be part of the answer. In fact, it's going to be a real key to the answer. I've got a lot more to talk about the problems and things. I'm conscious that people really want to talk about what it is that we kind of have to do. And I think that you all know the problems. Am I right? I mean, I can go on about the problems with productivity and a lot of things like that. But I'm conscious that we should move on to that. I think you're all okay like that. So we've been thinking really long and hard about this, and we think what's happened is, and I've kind of heard a little bit about this today, is that the idea of the social compact, you know what I mean by the social compact? It's fallen in a heap and it's been tipped upside down. So what I mean by the social compact is that people work and they pay taxes, companies earn a profit and they pay taxes, and then the government in return gives us back things that make a society civil. It's very difficult when you have ideology in our government but people don't believe in society. Then you've got a bit of a problem. But things have really turned about and are head over heels when you hear about what we were talking about this morning, mutual obligation. When suddenly that whole concept of the compact has been tipped around. Suddenly you're and we're the ones who have to give back. When did that happen? When did that turn around? We've got a job to turn that back. And we've got to make governments accountable. We've got to fight against this idea that we are not a society, because we are. Look at us all here in the room wanting to work together on these issues. We need to make sure that jobs, when we can see the writing on the wall, so let's say, for example, even if I didn't believe it had to happen, but even if you did believe that the automotive industry was going to die in this country and couldn't survive, then we should have had a transition plan. Why didn't we start thinking about that 20 years ago? We're partly to blame for that. I'll put my hand up. What are the new jobs of the future? Where are we going to invest in new industries? How are we going to grow new jobs? And part of the responsibility of doing that is the government. And right now, they should be doing that. We've had paper after paper written about where Australia's competitive advantage is and where it's going to be in the Asian century and all these industries that we know we can actually thrive and compete globally and well. We need investment in those industries. I'm going to go on forever, so you probably could speak.
I have some questions. Back in 1997, the ACU developed a new solar panel that was a third smaller but produced a third more solar power for what we got. And they fell through every government crack as far as funding to develop it to commercial level growth. And just, I can't remember, it was one of the Swedish countries that, Swedish company, a company from Sweden or somewhere, that came through with the money. So of course all that work went overseas as well. But just, it's happened time and time again. And just when all the whole car thing was going, Deakin University PhD engineering students came up with a new form of tyre and again, the same thing was happening. Any possibility of sort of the unions organising a slush fund so that they can sort of invest in things like that as an alternative to government or something?
Well, we have discussions all the time. Absolutely no, I hear what you're saying. John Howard actually set up a fund, if you believe it, if you remember, which was a seeding fund to actually help new industries like that start off. So for every dollar the government put in, industry had to put in $1.50 or something and created this fund. But we have
that's the main problem, because these weren't industries, these were the students coming
That
up
was
with the
startup,
ideas in the
yeah.
universities that needed the in-between funding to get it to the seeding funding stage.
Well, we need to go to the superannuation industry.
Well, just
Absolutely. There's $1 trillion in our superannuation industry that could be set aside for these things. That's right. You hear of lots of fabulous inventions. You could all probably tell me another one that was developed here and then made offshore because we didn't invest in the manufacturing of it.
Yeah, I have a black mark against you.
Oh.
You have not mentioned work for the dole.
I know, I'm getting to that.
Are
I'm getting
you?
to that. Hang on, give me a minute.
Well, you've mentioned the things we've got to work together, and that was
Yeah.
not included, right?
I'm getting there. Look, a whole page on work for the dole, okay? Anything else? I will get to this, sir. Yes.
You talked about precariat.
Mhm.
The precariat movement in the EU has been around for about 10 years. It seems as though, in my mind, having studied that for quite a while, that we're 10 years behind. So why is it so strong in Europe and, say, America, the precariat movement itself, which is amongst the trade union, the unemployed, the casualised, it's a very wide movement?
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Why
It's a
are we
good
so
question.
far behind, and why are we saying the Australian Unemployment Workers Union but not encompassing more? I think that have more scope if we said, okay, we're precarious.
I think there's a couple of things and why the precariat movement has not taken off so much in Australia, and it's because, number one, we have a very strong minimum wage.
Okay.
Very strong. We have a very strong social safety net. And
Both easily avoidable.
both easily avoidable. And I don't think, and I'm happy for people to differ, but I think we are heading that way, but the measures of inequality have not hit Australian economy to the level it's hit in Europe, where austerity measures after the global financial crisis were absolutely an abomination. And that austerity politics didn't happen here. If you remember, here in Australia, we did the opposite. We had a stimulus, and we used Keynesian economics, if you will. We stimulated the economy, and by virtue of that, by the hair of our chins, we escaped the really devastating impacts of the GFC. It did certainly have an impact, don't get me wrong, but not to the level that you saw in Spain, Portugal, oh my goodness, Greece. So I think slightly different economic situation here. But we're definitely quickly moving down that way. If you look at the measures of inequality, they are vast, quickly growing in Australia. And so we are very aware of precarious work. We did a wonderful research into that, which I won't bore you with now, but it's one thing that I'm particularly proud of, into insecure work in Australia, and it's certainly something that's on our agenda, absolutely, to tackle.
Could we say questions at the end?
Okay, I'm happy for that. Okay, so I'll clip over some of these things. Here's a gentleman so rudely announced that I hadn't got to things. Just joking. So, ACTU policies. What we had to start addressing these things. And first of all, there are economic steps that we can take, begin taking immediately to start undoing mounting damage that the employment crisis has wrought. And I know Cassandra would have talked about New Start. Absolutely. I mean, that has to be dealt with immediately. We have to really be aware of things like international trade deals that have a direct impact on our labour market and on jobs here. We have to start securing our minimum wages. There is a big attack on the way we set the minimum wage in Australia. And we really need to be very cognizant of any policies that strip away. It's that we are the envy of the world with how our minimum wage is set. Germany has just established a minimum wage based on ours. The United States is desperately trying to raise the minimum wage. You know, we've really got to protect these things that we have. Very solid standard conditions. We have to start really looking at casualisation and Uberisation. And I honestly think the way we need to do that is to redefine the social compact. What is missing now within our social compact to make people's lives secure, more secure? The ACTU is looking at things like portable entitlements. So that if you are in and out of work, you know, we have a good baseline, much better than New Start, to protect you when you're out of work. That you can access new skills, that you have a pocket of money that can give you sick leave, that can give everybody annual leave. Imagine if we had those things. And this is something that the ACTU is investing a great deal of money and a great deal of time in. The word for the dole, sir, is an absolute indictment on this society. It is a shocking policy. That's when I talked before about this mutual obligation being tipped over on its head. And I don't know when that happened. You know, it's really not only takes away dignity, but it takes away jobs. What we are seeing in the Northern Territory now, I don't know if this is everywhere, someone else might know this, but in the Northern Territory, work for the dole can be put into for-profit enterprises.
Really?
Yep.
So it's slavery.
It is slavery.
Occasionally it does here also, a few companies have utilised it.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, that is the tipping end of something that is really terrible, because they are jobs that are in the economy that could be taken by anyone looking for work, and yet they are going to be used by work for the dole recipients. And of course, you know, this is particularly an indictment on our Aboriginal communities, because in the Northern Territory, the vast majority of unemployed people are Indigenous people. They have to work longer, don't they, for
Yes.
6 months of the
12 months of the year.
12 months of the year. The rules are different.
Yep.
It is just an abomination, and we are going to fight against that.
What is this minimum wage?
The minimum wage in Australia is a law that says you have to be paid a certain amount, but of course we know it is undermined.
17,
Oh, what is the minimum wage?
What is the minimum wage?
Yeah, I think it's $17, like $690 a week or something.
It's either one or the other. Is it $17.29 an hour, and then you're counted as unemployed, or is it 38 hours at $17.29? That's where the problem is.
It's an hour. It's an hour.
Minimum wage. So if you work 14 hours, right, at $17.29, you're employed.
Correct.
That's not correct.
In fact, I think if you work 1 hour, I think it's 1 hour.
1 hour.
It should be based on the week. 17.29 times at 35 and a half.
should be at least 20 hours.
That's the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Anything under is unemployed.
Yep. No, I hear what you're saying. Absolutely.
It's rubbery figures.
It's very rubbery
That's what
figures.
we're trying to do. Yeah, we could all be on work for the dole, working at 17.29, 10 hours a week all around Australia. The unemployment's fixed. We've got 0% unemployment. We're all doing 10 hours.
Yep.
10 hours at 17.29.
That's what I said earlier. We have to challenge the way we measure unemployment, and absolutely all of those databases are rubbery. Did someone use that word? Rubbery, indeed. We have to challenge all of that. You're right. And we can start doing that. That's something we can start doing. You've already had one question, so do you mind if I come back to you? Because this gentleman hasn't. I won't forget you.
We're
I'll come
going to
back.
have questions at the end. I just still
Oh,
want to continue.
sorry,
I think there's no questions at the end.
Yeah.
And then we can do it all centralised.
I'm glad that we're having
If you don't
discussions. It's good. Thanks, Owen. Now, what else am I thinking? We need to fix our education and our training sectors. We need to fix things like the jobs network. We need to absolutely fix all of those social services that are supposed to help people get skills and get into work, but are dismally failing. Industry policy. You know, it's old-fashioned. Whenever I say that in Parliament, everyone goes, oh, shit, that's so 1980s, you know. Industry policy, nobody thinks about that anymore, and I touched on that before. Let's look at where we actually have competitive advantage, and the government should invest in them like we were talking about before. We need to fix our visa system. The temporary visa system, there's 1.1 million workers here in Australia right now on temporary work visas. Right? Not that I begrudge them work, but we really need to look at that. It's terrible exploitation of those workers. They are poorly organised, they do not know their rights, and unfortunately as a result they undermine any conditions that we have built here. Our tax system, Sandra probably talked about tax system, I'm not sure. We need transition plans for industries that we know will not exist in 20 years. And you can do it. In Germany, they took 20 years to close down their coal mining sector. They had a 20-year plan, so typically German, isn't it? But if they can do it, we can do it. They had 300,000 workers in their coal mining industry. They've taken 20 years, they closed down mine by mine by mine. They transitioned the workers from this coal mine into the other 10, and then they did redundancies, very good redundancies. People could access pensions early. They created other industries. It was a brilliant plan. We could do that and make sure that people just didn't all of a sudden bang 300,000 people out of work like what happened in the Latrobe Valley when they privatised the electricity sector down there. So there are things that we can do, absolutely. I was going to talk about changing the debate, and that's what conferences like this do. We need to start talking about fairness and respect. We really need to. We need to change the language. There's been a lot said about demonising of the unemployed, demonising of unions. You know, I'm a thug. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says I'm a union thug. Absolutely. So, you know, we need to really change the language. We need to stop talking, for example, about tax as a burden. You know, we do that all the time. Tax is a bloody privilege. You know, a lot of people would love to be able to pay tax if they had a decent paying job. And tax provides a lot of good things for us, a lot of services, and the very wealthy, the very rich, the uber rich, the multinationals should pay their fair share. We need to look at our system and make a moral judgment, like this gentleman's pointing out, as well as economic judgments about its values, about its success, about its appropriateness for the type of society we live in. If we accept that capitalism in its modern technological-driven guise is going to lead to a permanent group of unemployed or underemployed workers, as the rubbery stats suggest, then we simply can't continue with the charade of blaming people for not having jobs. Much bolder thinking is needed. Many parts of the world are experimenting with the social wage,
Yes.
which is very interesting. I am not 100% convinced, but I'm willing to be if people think it will work. Solidifying universal health care, making sure profitable big business contribute back to society. This is all easily done in my view. All we need is a great deal of political will. But to get that political will, we need to make sure we are having that debate. That is what we are talking about, that we are not just having a debate in government about the A, B, C, C. And I don't mean a television station. I mean the Australian Building and Construction Commission. A lot of people get them mixed up. But it's outrageous, I think. We had, on the lawns of Parliament yesterday, we had a great, fantastic protest, if you like, where we had hundreds of people down there with big banners saying, "We've got questions for Malcolm. Questions for Malcolm. Why aren't you talking about our unemployment crisis? Why aren't you talking about jobs? Why aren't you talking about healthcare?" These are the questions that we have. What is happening in our parliamentary processes is that these are the things that are not being debated or dealt with. So the ACTU is, look, we have an election now. July 2 looks like it's going to be. Okay, everyone agree? I think we're probably going to go there. And the ACTU is going to run a campaign just based on those things. Just the pillars of our living standards. Decent jobs, the creation of jobs, and workers' rights when they get jobs. Medicare, education, public services that work for us, not against us, and that are paid for by the Australian people. A secure retirement and a fair tax system. These are the things that we are going to fight for. These are the things that I think we already have pretty good things here. We can't lose them, but we've got to build on them and make them better. They are all under attack. They're always under attack. In fact, it's exhausting to try to stop the attacks on all of these things. And I could go into each one and explain to you the attacks, but I won't do that right now. Because really what we have to do is we have to pull together. We have to organise, organise, organise. It's what we've got to do. And we've got to grow the collective. And it's not just unions, it's right across civil society. Now, I really appreciate the work we do with ACOS. I really appreciate the work we do with the Welfare Rights Centre. I really appreciate the work that we do with a lot of organisations right across civil society who have the same values and are fighting for the same things for us. So whichever party, I don't care who wins the election, whichever party gets in the next election, they have to be very, very clear on this point, is that we will organise, we will fight for our rights, We will work together for a better future. Thank you. Hands up for questions.
With three questions.
This gentleman just has hand up for me.
I'm from the Sydney branch of the AUWU. I'm an on-site delegate and I work for the Dole site. I want to know, what are we? Are we volunteers or are we workers?
I think you're workers. Look, I would see you as workers. How do you classify yourself? I'm probably the wrong person to ask. What do you see
I
yourself
see
as?
us as workers,
Absolutely.
you know.
Looking for work.
But do you think then under the Fair Work Commission rules we have the right to actually properly unionise on-site, have a delegate in our OSR?
Probably not under the Fair Work Act, but that's certainly something that we could look at. I really haven't looked at that, and I should have. Does anybody know that? Does anybody here? I don't think so under the Fair Work Act. And I think it's part of what I said before about separating people who are looking for work from organised labour. I think that's really important.
I'd like to say really quickly, building on what Dan's saying. I know I don't want to eat anyone else's time, because I'm very mindful of that, but I want to thank Ged for really fantastic speech. I think we're on the brink of something big here. And from what Dan was saying, I just want to put to you a proposal that we've been thinking of doing and ask you about it. So the Australian Unemployed Workers Union is speaking about trying to kill workers' dole and kill the job agencies, right? And as you know, the job agencies, they make money for putting people to work for the dole activities, but not in the guidelines. It clearly says you don't have to work for the dole if you've got another approved activity. And approved activity can be a whole range of things, including voluntary work. And I actually managed to do my work for the dole as an approved voluntary activity through the National Union of Workers. And this opens up a massive opportunity, I believe, where the trade union movement as a whole can offer voluntary activities to unemployed workers, take them away from the clause of work for the dole, and introduce them to activism, to unionism, to just a whole world of possibilities. And this is something that I think we should be debating about today. And this, at solving our employment crisis, like this is already the immediate step.
One thing that can be done. Somebody doesn't like that idea?
Yeah.
That's a really tangible thing.
Two more questions.
You're talking about union numbers falling. I'm Marilyn King from Willing Workers. Well, we have... No, but you're talking about unions falling. We have a lot of our members who were long-term union members, and then when they became unemployed because the jobs got taken off overseas or various reasons, some of the unions, they immediately went and asked for help for the union to help, and some of the unions offered to suspend their payments, their union things. Some of them
stay members?
Yep. Some of them then reported to us that they've reported that when they went back, when they did get work in the same industry, and a lot of it is with the trades, they got industry work again, they got hit with a huge bill of arreared union dues. So they promptly, some of them paid them, some of them didn't, but they resigned. So that's something that could be looked at, please.
Absolutely. I'll look at that, don't we? Absolutely. That's crazy. Some of the things that we're looking at, I know there's lots of hands up, but just on that, some of the things that we're looking at is, Dave Oliver, who is the secretary of the union movement, says that there's something like 24 different ways he can be a member of the St Kilda Football Club. But if you want to be a member of a trade union, there's one. So that's something, we've got a whole group looking at exactly membership, ways you can join
Love to give
unions.
input.
Thank you, I'll take that back definitely.
Sorry, one thing that you haven't actually mentioned, that I'm actually having a disability myself, you didn't mention anything about disability and your stand and changing employees' attitudes and actually creating jobs that we're actually, like I'm actually visually impaired, stuff that we can do. And I was just wondering very briefly what you can say in terms of your disability point of views and where we sit in the picture.
It's funny you should say that, because just this morning we employed someone, just started this morning, to run our disability policy, which came out of our Congress last time, about working much more closely with the sector and making sure that work opportunities do arise, and when they arise that they are set aside, that people can actually be employed, gainfully employed. So it's going to be a huge focus of ours in the next, we had Congress last May, it's taken me this long, I'm sorry, to actually employ a dedicated officer, but we now have one. So I can put you in touch with him if you like, if you'd like to know more about that. We have to.
Last question.
Just curious, is there anything being done to take the elephant in the room, or the extreme neoliberal media like Murdoch?
Oh yeah.
Is there anything?
Yes, there is. You're going to hear. Yep.
I mean, it seems like the discussion is always getting gagged, and the narrative is always getting skewed, and unfortunately, still a lot of people just read the Herald Sun or they read the Daily Mail or whatever, and they've got no idea what's really going on. And that's a huge barrier.
There's two things I will say about that, if I can have the time on. Is that okay? Just
Go to about 3 more minutes.
3 minutes, okay. So, number one, it doesn't always work for them. You look at the Victorian election, okay? It didn't work. For 4 days straight, on the front page of the Herald Sun, they tried to say Dan Andrews and John Setka were in cahoots to destroy the world, okay? And they ran that like you wouldn't believe, didn't work. The Victorian people just said, yeah, right. I've got to say, we are in the People's Republic of Victoria. But more broadly, I think you are right, it does have a very sinister and very negative effect on the psyche of what's happening. But having said that, there are ways and means. Social media is incredibly powerful. We use social media brilliantly. Right now we're just really reaching out to young people. Has anyone here heard of Friendly Geordies?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't get it. But the young people love him. So, he's just amazing. He's really amazing. So we've been reaching out to him a bit and doing some work there. We got a little social media campaign yesterday that Just Ask Malcolm. We got 2 million people interacted with us on social media. 2 million people. And that was direct interaction. So that was people who actually did something, not people who saw it and didn't do anything. So, there are ways and means. You've got the wonderful Van Baden coming in, I think this afternoon, who's really helping us get beyond the traditional conservative media. She herself writes for The Guardian, which is a little better, and so we do a lot with that. So, and then there's the other thing that, things come to light that even Murdoch can't escape, like the Panama stuff, right? He just can't get around it, because it's going to pervade through, and good will win over, I believe it in the end, and the message will get through. And I think, just on tax, I was just saying the fact that just about every single person in this room knows about that is for me, it's really encouraging that we can get through that. And there are ways and means. I'm not so disturbed anymore. I mean, it still gets up my nose, when Grace Collier and all those awful people for the Oz, Janet Ulrichsen and everyone. But still, I think people are starting to see through it a bit. And can I please have that gentleman's question, because he's been so good and patient.
Yeah, firstly, I'm from the Sydney branch of the Australian Unemployed Workers Union. Before that, I was a member of another unemployed organisation. We did phone-ins on Work for the Dole. We got people to ring us. We got a lot of horror stories. We got someone who had to deal with prickles and brambles, dangerous work with totally unsafe gear. We got Campbelltown Council, I think it was, getting unemployed people to dig trees and plant their trees for them. And basically, what I want the union movement to do is to out this, to expose this, to name and shame, to use their influence on institutions which are using Work for the Dole basically to pressure them not to do it. Now, I'm basically disappointed in the silence, because we're talking about something like hundreds of thousands of slaves, the population of Wollongong enslaved labour. That's how serious it is. And basically, you're not mentioning it in your election campaign. Basically, I want direct physical solidarity against Work for the Dole from your and relevant unions like the Teachers Federation, the Nurses Federation, who could be dealing with nurses and teachers, aged slaves labour, etc. Now, can you give some sort of commitment that you'll do something on this, or what?
Well, you'll be pleased to know that the entire ACTU executive is going to meet in Darwin in August.
That's hot.
For just this reason. Because we think it is at its peak up there, it's at its most intense. So we are taking everybody up to Darwin, including a huge contingent of our Indigenous and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander membership. About 100 of our members are coming with us. So we are going to start a big focus on this, and you'll see it after the next executive. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.